In this video we're going to talk about scenes. So in my useful tray I have entity information, layers and scenes. We're talking about this third little group. And the way we use scenes is that at the moment you can see the box and you can see it in three-dimensional shape and we can move it around. But let's say for instance I want to dimension just this piece of wood. I need to take it out, a drawing into the workshop, and it needs to have dimensions on it. Best way to do it. At the moment this piece is part of base layer, but what I can do is I can create a new layer called front. I can then switch off base and I can switch off a lid. Whoops, always make sure your layer 0 is selected. I created the layer but I didn't move it, remember? So let's go back to base, let's take this unit, transfer it to the front layer and hide the remainder of the base. Now I have only this one piece of wood, and you'll see that what I've done to make life a little more interesting is I have taken the base, the bottom of the board of the box, and I've actually put it into a rebate rather than having it flush with the bottom. So that's just a more interesting dimensioning challenge. So now I have a piece of wood here and I need to dimension it in some way. I need to show enough detail. Now I may choose not to dimension that at this stage. I may just put a note there that I have a finger rebate, and we may dimension it something like this, and I'm going to zoom extends to get some idea of whether it shows me all the detail I'm looking for. Not bad. So now I start adding dimensions. So I want my overall length, I want my overall height, I might want my width there and my width there. I might want my piece that I cut off here. Alright, how am I doing? So we have the same on the other side. I can still do this here. They will line up. And then what I need to dimension perhaps is this dimension there, this dimension there, and I think I've pretty well dimensioned everything I need. So this is 6 millimeters from the bottom. It's a 6 millimeter rebate. My total piece of wood is 100 millimeters high. It is a total of 20 millimeters thick. I haven't shown that as a single dimension, so maybe what I'm going to do is move this into here, and I may choose to dimension. Oops. Get that little purple dot, because otherwise you're going to fiddle with the dimension that you've already placed. Okay, so from there to there, and I'm going to pull it out. So my wood is 100 millimeters high, it's 20 millimeters thick, it's 235 millimeters long. My rebate here is 20 millimeters wide and 10 millimeters deep. And then here, this rebate for the base is 6 millimeters above the bottom of the piece of wood, and it's 6 millimeters thick, and it's the same depth as 10 millimeter depth that's here. And you can actually see that because there's no line separating these two surfaces. And then, as I say, I'm going to put a little leader in here, and I'm going to put a little note that says finger recess. Now I would probably do that on the router table, so I'm not going to be too worried about the dimensions. I will do what feels right and I'll use my hand to do it. So there we go. I have dimensioned this piece of timber, this component, and I could take this drawing out to the workshop and I now know what it is that I'm trying to produce. There's only one problem, is that how do I then go back to showing the rest of the box? Well, I took away the dimensions, the layers for the dimensions, so I'm going to add another layer here, and I'm going to add a layer called Z front. Lots of history about why I use the letter Z as my first letter for these, but Z front, the little Z underscore, tells me that this is a layer that contains dimensions. So I'm going to take all of these dimensions that I have here. There's a quicker way of doing that. What I'm going to do is just quickly hide the front. All I'm left with is the dimensions. I can select all, which I can use Control A. I can move those onto Z front, and I have Z front, and I can put the front back. Now that does mean that I can hide the dimensions, I can put the base back, and I can rotate around and have a look at my box, and I can even put in my lid whenever I want to. If I turn on the dimensions, which I don't want to do, that doesn't help me, but if I want to see my dimensions, well, then all I have to do is hide the lid, hide the part of the base, switch on the dimensions, and rotate it round to the way I want it, complete with zoom extents. What a nuisance. So, as with many things, there is a simpler way of doing things. And I'm going to go back to my overall view of my box, because what we're going to do is we're going to create scenes, and the first scene I always create is this one of the overall object without any dimensions here. And I tend to call that an ISO view, isometric or 3D view, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to come here to scenes, and I'm going to hit plus to add a scene. This little warning here says pop up and everything. It says save, but warning scenes is, I haven't quite worked out what it is, but it's to do with when we've set our styles originally. You can either just create scene and save as a new style, or you can update the selected style, or do nothing and save changes. But just, you've got to get to the point where you create a scene, and what you see here is scene 1. Now this is all I'm seeing here, so I'm going to show details. No, that's not it. Let me pause. I've just discovered a change from 2016 to 2017. What I want to do is I want to give the scene a meaningful name, so I'm going to click on the scene, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to rename scene. And this has become highlighted, so I'm going to type, I can either type in ISO, which is my usual. Oh, there we go. So ISO, and it has changed. I'm now going to add a scene here, which I'm going to rename, and I'm going to type in front. So I have these different scenes. Now I'm going to make sure I click on ISO. I'm going to arrange this the way I want it to be. I'm going to make sure I've got my zoom extents. It's got to look the way I want. And then what I'm going to do, the easiest I actually find, is to click on the tab, you right click here, and you update the tab. Now I'm going to click on front, and you'll see it moves. So the scene was created with the box in a different position. But now what you're going to be doing is you take the base and you switch it off. You take the lid and you switch it off. You take the dimensions and you switch them on. You orbit around until you get the dimension, the view that you want, the angle and orientation that you want, the zoom extending, the zooming that you want. You look at that and you say, yeah, I can take that to the workshop and I understand these dimensions and I can produce my shape from it. If you can go ahead with that, well then what you can do is you can update the scene. Now watch what happens. When I click on ISO, I get the whole box. When I click on front, I get only the front and its dimensions. And this is the power of scenes. I don't need to manipulate the drawing myself every time I want to create some sort of view that I want to look at to get some dimensions. All I need to do is create the scene. And I can have a range of scenes that work across here for the front, for the side, for every piece that I need to dimension, and then I can go and I can export these scenes one scene at a time, and I can print them and take them out to the workshop with me. And this is why we use scenes. So this combination of components, of layers, and of scenes, and by putting dimensions on a different layer to the component itself, is very, very powerful. And this is the best way that I have found to be using SketchUp to produce working drawings that you're going to pick up and take out to the workshop with you to manufacture your product. So that's the brief overview on scenes. I hope this actually explains all of these features well enough to use. I certainly have explained the features that I use with some regularity and the features that I find most useful. If you use these features, you should have all the tools that you need to document your designs, to create and document and walk out with all your thinking complete on a piece of paper into the workshop to go manufacture. Good luck, go practice.